The first thing Elena Marsh felt when she woke was the wrong kind of cold. Cryo-sleep cold burned. It scraped the lungs and turned the throat to glass. This cold was soft, curated. The cold of a room kept it exactly 17 degrees for the comfort of visitors who were not her. She opened her eyes inside her cradle and saw, through the frost on the lid, a child. The child was not human. It had 4 eyes set in a wide blue face, and it pressed a small palm against the glass of her cryotube, while a voice somewhere above spoke in a language she did not know. The child's parent pulled it back gently. A velvet rope. A polished floor. Elena Marsh, commander of the colony ship Perseverance, was looking at her own death notice. She had launched from Lunar Orbit 3 on the 14th of March, 2198, with 2,400 sleepers in her holds, and the destination of Proxima Centauri b Earth had been dying behind her. The Skarn bombardment had stripped half the northern hemisphere. The colony fleet had been Earth's last answer, 8 ships, scattered, hopeful. She had closed her eyes expecting to wake above a blue world with 2 suns. Instead, the plaque read, in glyphs she could not understand, and in one small line of human English someone had bothered to translate, Homo sapiens. Origin World Sol 3. That was the lie she noticed first. Even before the panic, even before the grief, Earth had not died by its own hand. She kept her breathing slow. The cradle had woken her, but the wake protocol was wrong. There was no warmth cycle, no nutrient drip, no medical sweep, just a flicker, then a return to sleep state, then another flicker. Someone, somewhere on this ship, was fighting the system. Someone was still alive. Through the lid she watched the room. It was vast. The Perseverance had been parked, suspended, gutted just enough to let visitors walk through her ribs. Her hull had been polished and lit from beneath like a museum sculpture. Walkways spiraled around the cryo deck. Aliens of a dozen species moved along them, pointing, nodding, murmuring. There was a tall, slim creature in pearl gray robes leading a small group. It had the bearing of an instructor or a curator. 6 fingers on each hand. A long throat that pulsed when it spoke. The voice was soft and reverent, the voice you used at funerals, and Elena understood with a slow, sick certainty that this was her funeral. She and her crew were the corpses. The exhibit was the eulogy. The cradle flickered again. This time something in the readout stuttered to life inside her line of sight. A green dot. Then text, in plain command English, scrolling fast. Commander Marsh. Stay still. They watch us at the half hour. Next window in 4 minutes. I am Liar Vance, Junior Systems, Deck 9. I think I am the only one fully awake right now, and I have been awake for 16 days. I have been very careful. Elena's throat tried to close. She forced it open. Lior, she thought. Lior Vance. She remembered him. A boy of 22 when he boarded. Quiet. Brilliant with soup routines. He had hugged his mother on the boarding ramp and had not cried, because he had promised her he would not. Cryosystems are intact but stripped of external power. They run them as a display loop. They do not know the cradles are alive. They think we are preserved corpses. I have been hiding inside the maintenance ducts and rerouting trickle current to keep us viable. They are going to open the cradles for the gala. They are going to take you out and pose you. They want to show what humans look like in motion. Another pause. Mom. I think they are going to dissect Sergeant Okafor for the centerpiece. When she opened them, she was a commander again. "Tell me," she mouthed, knowing he could read lips through the cradle camera. "Who else?" The text answered. "Dr. Hara, Cradle 411. I can wake her safely. Sergeant Okafor 602. I can wake him, but he will be slow for an hour. Engineer Diaz 319. The boy, Thomas, Cradle 217. Elena's stomach turned at that last name. Thomas had not been on the manifest. Thomas had been an 8-year-old stowaway, the son of a maintenance technician who had died in the launch riots. Elena had found him in a cargo locker an hour after departure and had not had the heart to recycle his small body back into the void. She had quietly rewritten his file as a colonist. She had put him in cryo with a prayer. He had survived 4 centuries in a ship that had been called extinct. "Wake them," she mouthed, quietly. "In that order. Hara first. I need her medical eyes." The green dot blinked off. The half-hour patrol was coming. Elena lay still inside her cradle and listened to the murmur of an alien crowd discussing her bones. Dr. Yukihara woke without sound, the way she did everything, and within an hour she had crawled through the maintenance shaft to Elena's cradle and cracked the lid. She did it during a shift change when the gallery dimmed for what the placards called Reverence Hour. Elena stepped out of her tomb in the dark, her bare feet on cold floor, her muscles screaming, her vision swimming, and she did not allow herself to fall. Hara caught her anyway. "You weigh less than I remember," the doctor whispered. "I weigh less than I was," Elena whispered back. "How long?" 417 years, Hara said, "give or take." The doctor's face was older than it should be. Cryosleep aged you in tiny increments. Hara had the look of a woman who had been preserved for centuries and had used every one of those centuries to decide she was still angry. "Here's everyone," Elena said. Hara pressed a finger to her lips and led her up through the ducts. They came out 3 decks above the gallery, in a service crawl space Lior had made into a nest. The boy, the engineer, was thinner than memory, and his eyes had the bright, wet shine of a person who had been alone with a problem for too long. He had food packets stolen from a janitor's locker, water siphoned from a coolant line, and a screen, glowing blue, on which he had drawn the museum. There are 17 wings. Each one is a dead world. We are the newest exhibit. They opened our wing 12 standard cycles ago. Before that, the Perseverance was in storage. Before that, she was salvage. Before that, she was a derelict drifting in the Oort cloud of our own system, where they found her after the bombardment. "Found her," Hara said. "Or planted her." Lawyer nodded slowly. "I have been listening to the curator's tour for 2 weeks, Mom. I have been learning their language from the audio loops. They speak of us as a tragic species. They say humanity destroyed itself with internal war, and then fled in colony ships, all of which failed. They say the Perseverance was the last and the bravest. They say we were almost magnificent." "Almost," Elena said. "Yes," Lior said. "That word, almost. They love that word. It is the theme of every wing in this museum. Each species almost made it. The Yeneth almost achieved sustainable fusion before their sun ate them. We almost colonized Proxima before our wars caught us. The whole museum is a lecture on how almost is the natural state of every species, except the one that built the museum." He swiped the screen. The image changed. A long line of Vossari nobles in pearl robes, posed for some official portrait, beneath a banner showing a stylized sun being eclipsed by a slim hand. "Mom," Lior said, The Vasari did not bombard Earth. The Skarn did. We knew that. We always knew that. But the Skarn bombardment used weapons that the Skarn could not build. They were given those weapons by a patron species. There's a wing called the Hall of Sponsored Outcomes. It celebrates wars the Vasari sponsored from a distance for the cultural good of the galaxy. Sergeant Rashid Okafor came up through the duct then, ducking, already armed with a length of pipe he had wrenched from a bracket. He took in the scene without surprise. He had been a soldier on 3 continents before Earth burned. He had a face like a closed door and a voice like soft gravel. "Commander," he said, reporting. "Sergeant," Elena said. He looked at the screen. He read the crest. He read the banner. He read the timeline Lior had built from stolen audio. Then he said, very quietly, the only thing that needed saying. "So we killed him." Hara put a hand on his arm. "Not yet. We have 8 days to the gala. We have 4 awake. We have 2,396 asleep. We are inside a building that thinks we are dead. Let us think about this." Elena watched her people, her 4 people. She thought about the cradles below them, full of farmers and welders and teachers and a stowaway boy who should not have lived. She thought about the Concordance crest. She thought about the word almost. She thought about what was buried in the Perseverance's core that nobody on Earth had told even her crew about. The thing she had been given a sealed key for, in a sealed envelope, on a sealed shuttle, 3 hours before launch. She had been told it was a deterrent. She had been told to use it only if humanity truly had no other recourse, and even then to consider very carefully whether deterrence was worth the price. She had not opened the envelope. She had carried it, sewn into the lining of her uniform, into cryo. The envelope was almost certainly still there, 417 years old, brittle as a dead leaf, against her ribs. "We do not kill them," Elena said. "Not yet. First, we wake the rest. Quietly. Cradle by cradle. Sergeant, you and I work the cryo deck under cover of Reverence Hour. Doctor, you stabilize them as they come up. Lior, you keep the museum blind. Whatever you have been doing to fool their sensors, keep doing it and find me a way to talk to the gallery sound system on the night of the gala." "Talk to it," Hara said. "How?" "I want to make a speech," Elena said. Elena Marsh smiled then for the first time in 4 centuries. It was not a kind smile. "Yes, Sergeant. A speech. And then we steal our ship back." 6 nights they worked. 6 nights of crawling through ducts, cracking cradles by 2s and 3s, hiding the Woken in the deeper holds where no tour ever came. Hara worked like a woman possessed, drawing reserve nutrients from coolant systems and stealing thermal blankets from a maintenance closet that the Vasari had labeled with their version of the word forgotten. Yor reprogrammed the heat sensors so the 2,000 warm bodies registered as ambient drift. Okafor trained the Able into rough squads, using mop handles and ration bars for batons. By the 7th night they had 300 awake. By the 8th, 600. Thomas was among the first hair awoke because Elena had asked. The boy stepped out of his cradle 400 years older and not a day grown, and when he saw Elena he hugged her around the waist and whispered, "I knew you would come back for me, ma'am." And Elena Marsh, who had not cried since her brother Marcus burned in the evacuation of Sao Paulo, cried then, silently, into the boy's hair. She did not let anyone see. On the 9th day, the gala began. The Hall of Extinct Species had been decorated for the centennial of the museum's founding. From their hiding places in the upper ducts, Elena and her people watched the Vasari elite arrive. Pearl robes, long throats, Six-fingered hands holding cups of something that glowed. There were other species too. Skarn delegates in their carapace armor, looking exactly as Elena had been told they looked. The predators who had broken Earth's sky. A pod of squat ambassadors from a world she did not know. A hovering cluster of light that might have been a sentience or might have been decoration. At the center of the gallery stood the curator. His name, Lior had learned from the audio loops, was Velith Nim. He was tall even for a Vossari, slim as a flute, and he wore a half cape of what looked like woven silver hair. He spoke now from a raised dais, and his voice carried through the gallery with the soft ceremonial weight of a man who has rehearsed grief he does not feel. "Friends," Velith Nim said, "honored peers. Tonight we celebrate the gentlest of our wings, the Hulsvolmost. We celebrate those who reached and did not quite arrive. Their stories teach us that the cosmos is generous to the patient and merciless to the proud. Behold." He raised a slim hand. The lights rose around the Perseverance. Servomotors in the cradle bay began to hum. The cradles were rotating into displayed position. Elena's own cradle, still empty under a holographic projection of her sleeping form, swung up to the dais. Beside it, on a separate plinth, lay a body Elena did not recognize at first. A human body. Not from her crew. It took her a moment to understand, and then she did, and her stomach turned. It was a body the Vossari had grown, from samples, from hair and bones scraped off her ship. They had cloned a generic human, a specimen, to dissect for the gala, because they had wanted a fresh one, and her sleepers had been deemed too valuable as static display. Velith Nim stepped onto the plinth. He raised a long curved blade. In keeping with our tradition, he said, "We offer the assembly an act of communion with the lost." The curator dissects. The curator demonstrates. The curator names what has been ended, that we may know it. He looked down at the body with something that was not cruelty. It was worse than cruelty. It was a curator's tenderness. "Homo sapiens," he began. "Bipedal, endothermic, origin soul-free, cause of cessation, internal violence and ecological collapse. The species reached for the stars and lost grip. We name them now in honor, and we keep them, that the galaxy may remember." In the duct above the gallery, Lior Vance closed his eyes and pressed a sequence into a stolen tablet. Then he pressed it again to be sure. Then he whispered, "Ma'am, you are live." The gallery sound system went quiet, and then it was Elena's voice, and not Velith Nim's, that filled the Hall of Extinct Species. "Curator Velith Nim," she said, "please put down the knife." The curator's long throat froze mid-pulse. Every face in the gallery turned upward, every species, every diplomat. The sound was not coming from any visible speaker, it was everywhere. Lior had taken the gallery's loudspeaker grid and he had given it to her. Elena spoke from the duct above. Her crew had pulled the grate aside. She was kneeling at the edge of the opening, looking down on the gala with her hands on her thighs and her bare feet on cold metal, dressed in her old gray command uniform that Hera had pulled from her storage locker. She did not need a microphone. The grid found her. "I am Commander Elena Marsh," she said, "of the human colony ship Perseverance. I am the woman in the cradle on your days. I am not extinct. None of us are." She let that sit. The gallery did not breathe. Velith Nim recovered first. He smiled, the slow smile of a host who has spotted an unscheduled performer and intends to be charmed. "How wonderful," he said into the air. A theatrical surprise. The artists outdo themselves. "Friends, please, enjoy the show." "He thinks we are part of the entertainment," Hara whispered behind Elena. "Let him," Elena whispered back. "Curator," she said aloud, "your records describe humanity as a species that destroyed itself. Your wing of sponsored outcomes describes the Skarn bombardment of Earth as a regrettable internal conflict between primitives. I have spent the last 8 days reviewing your records. I have found the requisitions. I have found the shipping manifests. I have found the signature, your signature, curator, on the order that authorized the transfer of plasma lance technology to the Skarn 3 months before they burned my world. Velithnim's smile did not move. His throat pulsed once. A slander, he said calmly. A theatrical slander. Friends, this is regrettable. The simulation has overreached. Security, please. In the gallery, Bossary guards in pearl armor began to move toward the exhibit perimeter. They were calm. They had centuries of calm. Curator, Elena said, I am not finished. She nodded to Lior. The gallery's main display screen, the one that had been showing a slow rotation of the Perseverance's hull schematics, blanked. Then it filled with text. Vasari text. Skarn text. He had pulled the originals from the museum's own archive. The archive Velithnim himself had locked behind his administrative key. The archive that proved everything. A gasp ran through the gallery. The squat ambassadors leaned forward. The Skarn delegates did not gasp. Their carapaces tightened. You profited, Elena said. Your concordance profited. Earth was not a tragedy of nature. Earth was a market intervention. We were a species you decided was rising too fast, and you hired the Skarn to slow us. And when we still launched our colony ships, you tracked them, and you let 7 of them be in deep space, because deep space did the work for you, and you took the 8th, the Perseverance, because she was beautiful, and you put her in your gallery because beautiful corpses fund museums. She drew a breath. Curator, you wear my people's hair on your shoulders. The Vossari nobles in the gallery were not looking at Elena now. They were looking at Velithnim. The squat ambassadors were looking at the Skarn. The Skarn delegates were looking at the exits. Velithnim's smile had finally cracked. It was not anger that broke it. It was annoyance. The annoyance of a man whose evening has been spoiled by a gauche guest. Take her down, he said quietly. Take all of them down. The guards moved. But the guards moved into a gallery that was no longer empty. Sergeant Rashid Okafor had been busy too. While Elena spoke, 600 humans, lean from cryo and angry from history, had been moving through the maintenance corridors with mop handles and pry bars, and the simple cold patience of a species that had been told it was extinct and had decided, instead, to disagree. They came down the spiral walkways like a tide. Okafor had not promised them victory. He had promised them that they would not die quiet. The first Vossari guard raised a stun lance and was simply lifted off the ground by 3 farmers from Iowa who had buried more sons than any of them deserved. The second guard fired and clipped a young woman in the shoulder, and Hara had her bandaged before she stopped moving forward. The Skarn delegates broke for the gala doors and found the doors held by engineer DS and a welder named Ono who had spent 400 years asleep and 20 minutes very, very awake. Velithnim moved for the day's console. Elena had been waiting for that. She dropped from the duct, 15 feet, landed badly, rolled, came up, her knees screamed. She did not care. She crossed the days in 6 strides and put her hand on his wrist before he reached the panel. He was taller than her by half. He looked down at her with the polite confusion of a man who has been touched by his own taxidermy. How? He said. The Perseverance is still spaceworthy. Your engineers maintained her, lovingly. Your power couplings are connected to her core for the Gala light show. Right now, in this moment, my engineer has rerouted those couplings. I can ignite her engines from this console. She will leave your gallery. She will tear the roof off your museum. She will probably tear the roof off your city. She tightened her hand on his wrist. He felt, for the first time in his curatorial career, a human grip. Horror. Elena said. You can give me the broadcast keys to every museum in the Concordance, every wing, every audio loop, every plaque. I have a new exhibit to install, Curator. It is called The Hall of What Actually Happened, and I want it in every wing of every museum on every world your Concordance owns, and I want your name on it. Velith Nim stared at her. You would not, he said. You would die in the launch. Your people would die. I have died once already, Elena said. My world has died once already. Curator, my brother burned alive in Sao Paulo because your accountants decided we were rising too fast. Do you really believe I am the one in this room who is afraid to lose something? She let that sit. Then she said, more quietly, also, Curator, there is something you do not know about the Perseverance. There is a contingency in her core. But it is there, Curator, and I am told it would do to your homeworld what your Skarn did to mine. If you push me, I will open the envelope. If you do not, I will leave the envelope sealed. Forever. That is my offer. Around them, the gala had become a riot, and the riot was being won by people in gray uniforms older than nations. Velith Nim looked at her hand on his wrist. He looked at his Skarn delegates being herded into a corner by an old farmer with a pipe. He looked at the gallery screens where his own signature glowed beside the death of a world. He looked finally at the dissection table, at the cloned human body he had been about to open like a book. Something in his curated face moved. Take the keys, he said. Take them. Take the broadcast. Take your ship. Take everything. But understand this, you will not be welcome anywhere. The Concordance is larger than you imagine. We will not forgive a humiliation of this scale. Curator, she said, I do not need forgiveness. I need a stage. You have given it to me. Then she turned to her people. Sergeant? Liar. Get them aboard. They got aboard. The Perseverance had not flown in 417 years, but she had been kept beautiful for the gala. The Vossari had polished her. They had repaired her micrometeorite scoring. They had topped her reaction tanks for the show ignition. Lior's heart almost stopped when he saw the readouts. She is full, he whispered. She is fully fueled, ma'am. They are going to do a real ignition for the centennial. Then we will give them their ignition, Elena said. Her people poured up the ramps. Hara organized triage in the medbay. Okafor stood on the bridge with a length of pipe still in one hand, watching the museum guards finally figure out that they had lost the gallery. Toma sat in the navigator seat with his small knees pulled up and his eyes very wide. Lior brought up the engines. Velith Nim watched from the dies as the ship that had been his greatest exhibit shuddered and sang and lifted, slowly, deliberately, through the holographic ceiling of the Hall of Extinct Species. The roof was made of light, and it parted around her hull like water. The air above the museum filled with the white roar of plasma, drives that had not breathed since the year humans walked on Mars. The Perseverance rose. The museum fell away. The city below, the great pearl city of Vossari Prime, watched its newest cultural treasure tear a hole in its own sky. And then, from every screen and every wing of every museum in the Concordance, Elena Marsh's voice began to speak. Lior had used the broadcast keys. She did not gloat. She did not threaten. She read the records, the shipping manifests, the accounting glyphs, the names of the Vossari nobles who had signed the orders, the dates, the amounts. She read for an hour. She read into the orbital traffic. She read into the mining colonies. She read into the academies. She read into homes where Vossari children had grown up, believing their species was the patient gardener of a clumsy galaxy. And in every wing of every museum, in front of every plaque that had said extinct by their own hand, the Concordance learned a different sentence. When the broadcast ended, The Perseverance was already past the third moon. They jumped to a darkness Lior had calculated and held there for 2 days while Hara stabilized the wounded, and Okafor counted heads, and Elena sat alone in her quarters and looked at the envelope sewn into the lining of her uniform. She did not open it. She placed it on her desk. She looked at it for a long time. Then she walked to the bridge and called her senior crew together, and she said, "This stays sealed. We took back our ship without it. We will take back our future without it. The day we open this envelope is the day we have become what they accused us of being." Hara nodded. Okafor said, "Ma'am, you may regret that." He had been quiet for a long time. He had the wet, bright eyes of a young man who had stopped being young somewhere in the last 9 days. "Ma'am," he said, "there are signals." "Signals?" "Yes, Mom. Ever since we broadcast, coming from all over the dark, encrypted in old Earth defense ciphers, 8 or 9 of them." "Mom, they are colony ships. They are answering us. They thought they were the only ones left. They thought everyone else had died. They went silent because they thought it was over. Mom." She had been told that 7 of the 8 colony ships were lost. She had been told this by Vasari archives. She had taken the Vasari at their word. She would not, she realized, do that again. "How many?" she asked. Lior counted his screens. 6 confirmed, he said. 3 more pending. "And ma'am, one of the signatures is the Magellan, Captain Marcos Marsh." Elena did not move. Captain Marcos Marsh. Her brother had not burned in Sao Paulo. Her brother had been on the Magellan. She had not known. The chaos of the evacuation, the lost manifests, the burning city. Someone had put him on the wrong ship and never had time to tell her, because all the times for telling her had become fire. She stared at the screen. "Ma'am," Lior said softly, "do you want me to open the channel?" Elena Marsh, commander of the Perseverance. The woman who had been declared extinct on a plaque in a gallery on Vasari Prime. The woman who had put her hand on the curator's wrist and walked her ship out through a hologram ceiling, looked at her crew. At Thomas, who had drifted onto the bridge and was holding the back of her chair with both small hands. "Open the channel," she said. Her brother's voice, 417 years older and exactly the same, said, "Lena, is that you? Tell me it is you." "It is me," she said. "Marcos, it is me. We are not extinct." And in the dark beyond the third moon of Vasari Prime, on a stolen colony ship full of farmers and welders and teachers, and a stowaway boy in a sealed envelope no one would open, the human species, which had been almost, stopped being almost. The Concordance would not forgive them. Velith Nim had been right about that. There would be fleets sent. There would be assassinations attempted. There would be wings of museums hastily redecorated and accountants quietly executed, and centuries of careful narrative scrubbed and rewritten and scrubbed again. The hall of sponsored outcomes would close within the cycle. The curator himself would be found 3 weeks later in his private wing, his pearl robes neatly folded, his half-cape of human hair ceremonially burned. The official cause would be despair. The actual cause would never be confirmed. Tonight, on the bridge of the Perseverance, Elena Marsh listened to her brother's voice and held a small boy's hand and watched her engineer plot a rendezvous with 8 ships full of people who had thought they were the last of anything. Hara stood beside her with arms folded and said, quietly, "What now, Commander?" She thought about her crew and her ship and the 7 sister ships rising from their cold pockets and the Concordance's careful stories falling apart in every wing of every museum on every world. She thought about the word almost. Then she said, "Doctor, we go home. Not Earth. Earth is gone. We make a new home. We gather the others. We build. We grow. We send back word, very politely, to every species in this galaxy that ever bought a Concordance ticket to look at our bones." "What word?" Hara asked. "Avail." "The exhibit," she said, "is closed. The species is back. Adjust your plaques. If you made it this far, the Perseverance has more sisters out there in the dark, and their stories are waiting. Subscribe to Midnight Galaxy and walk with humanity as we light the long way home."